All right, this is another episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast. And today we have Adeela Afiz coming in from,
New Zealand.
I think you're our first New Zealand interview.
Oh, that's amazing. There's so many Kairos down here.
And we're coming in today from the beautiful state of Colorado. And I'll let Luke open up with you today.
Well, Dr. Adelia, thank you for being our guest today. And typically, how we like to start the show is we ask our guest, tell us your chiropractic story and what influenced you to initially get into the field of chiropractic.
Yeah, sure. I was a teenager that had what would be defined as chronic pain. So I just had like constant neck and, upper body stiffness and pain. And had never heard of a chiropractor, didn't know what a chiropractor was. And this was around the same time that I'm like 16, 17, looking at what I'm going to do when I leave high school. And I'd always thought I was going to get into medicine or the medical field. My largest driver was helping people. And so anyway, trying to find help for this pain as a young 16, 17-year-old, finally we go to a chiropractor. And I don't think it was long. It was like a couple of weeks and it was gone after years of having this pain and changing pillows and et cetera, et cetera. So what I loved, and when I then looked into what chiropractic was, and we have, if you guys have heard, I'm sure, about the amazing New Zealand College of Chiropractic, and we have this very philosophically sound college in New Zealand. So when I went to have a look and find out about it, I just loved what they were sharing about the philosophy of chiropractic, helping people, doing it naturally, empowering them. I thought it would be easier than medicine until you get into chiro and start going through. I don't think you realize how intense it is, but I wouldn't change it for the world. So that is my chiropractic story. That's how I ended up becoming a chiropractor and making the very best friends I could have asked for along the way, and meeting amazing mentors and lecturers who still have an impact in my life and many of our lives.
And you're doing some unique things over there that maybe not all chiropractors are doing. In addition to saving lives, you have a podcast of your own. Is that something you can maybe touch upon a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I have a podcast called the Business Whisperer podcast. That podcast was born out of, me starting to do things a little bit differently about quite a while, after I graduated, I got into practice. I've been an associate, I've been a locum, and then I bought my own practice. And I was in practice and realizing that the part that I loved was the emotional connection, but also helping people through techniques such as neuro-emotional technique. And so my practice style started to shift to actually more of these techniques, which were longer appointments. We're getting more into the emotional side of what was creating the stress, pain, subluxations in their life. And I got to the point where I realized that, hey, this is actually where I'm really gifted and talented. There are lots of amazing chiros that can offer so much help, but I'm not the person that wants to be doing, shoulder rehab or more of the manual adjusting. I was really helping people and getting so much fulfillment by focusing on this particular part of chiropractic. And I grew from there. I put in a lot of time and effort into growing the emotional and the mind-body connection side of my practice for my own self, as well as what I was doing with clients. And that led me on a journey with my business and on a journey with evolving how I work with clients and what I do now. And part of that has involved creating some different kinds of work, which include body whispering and business whispering, and this podcast called the Business Whisperer Podcast. And it all comes back to just really living an authentic, holistic, and fulfilling life.
And you mentioned off camera, sometimes it's a solo cast, sometimes you have guests. Can you tell us maybe who are some of the people that you have on your show?
We have all sorts of people. The whole point of the podcast is to share with people that you can create a business that is financially successful as well as fulfilling by doing what works for you and creating your business in the way that works for you. So I have everyone from people who started and created an online business doing something that they thought no one would pay them money for, to a lot of people like myself who have created a business where they thought they had to do it a certain way. Like for me, growing up and then becoming a chiropractor, I was always actually what we call a highly compliant person. I'm a great client, I'm a great patient, I'm a great student. I always do what you're meant to do. And so when you become an adult and you think that, being in practice is meant to look a certain way, or being in business is meant to look a certain way, but that certain way doesn't necessarily work for you, or you're aware of doing it in a different way that resonates better with your heart and your soul and your mind, that's what I ended up doing with my practice and changing what I was doing and what I was offering. And those are the kinds of guests I have on.
Well, typically we save this part for the end, but in case people are curious, where can they go if they wanted to listen to your show?
Awesome. It's on Apple iTunes. It's on Spotify. It's called the Business Whisperer Podcast. And it's also obviously on my website, which is www.dradeelaafiz.com.
Well, heck, I feel like the Chiro whisperer now.
You probably are, Jim.
I'm going for the URL. Don't beat me to it.
I'll let you have that one.
So do you have any favorite mantras or motivational words of wisdom that maybe you hang up in your office or you kind of repeat to yourself every day?
Yeah, I love positive affirmations and mantras. I have quite a few, but I love, and I'm sure it's Anne Frank that said this, but she said, despite everything, I believe people are good at heart. And so we can live in a world that creates so much pain and can create people really questioning humanity and where we have ended up, especially recently. And I always go back to that because my thing is people. I love people. I love working with people. I love seeing the transformation in people. And I believe that actually we are good at heart and we can, find that goodness and bring it out. And that's what creates hope in our world, despite what might be going on around us politically, environmentally, etc., etc.
That's great. So how do you think the world would change if everyone started seeing chiropractors and getting checked and adjusted?
That would be a dream come true. I just think I think the world would be, first of all, so much more balanced in its ability. Like we've gone so far away from, I'm going to use the word normal or the norms, but they may be the norms that we're aware of. So what I'm obvious based on our background and what we learn about how natural the body is, how we are connected to and part of nature, and the innate intelligence that we are part of and that we have flowing through us. And when I look out to the world and I see how far we've come from that balance, and especially when I look at, countries like America, like we're pretty lucky in New Zealand. I'm talking about things like our food sources and our quality of air and water. I think it's gone so far away from what it was meant to be in certain parts of the world that people don't even realize how unnatural their lifestyle has become, and how, it is just normal now for everyone to be medicated for something or the other. And even in New Zealand, the rates of depression and suicide are through the roof. And almost every second person you've talked to either knows of someone or personally themselves, they are on an antidepressant type of medication, an anti-anxiety medication. And I just don't think we remember what it feels like to be our innate natural selves with access to that power of healing and, providing our body with what it requires to come back to that state of being able to heal and regenerate. And so for me, chiropractors and chiropractic practices create this hub and this place that create an opportunity for people to come back to that knowing and to experience that healing and hopefully adopt that lifestyle.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. For me to be able to hear what you're sharing with Luke, I love that Luke is so in charge of working on these episodes with me. This is episode 243 that we've done over the past 3 years. And not every episode that we've done interviews on actually gets produced into becoming one of our flagship episodes. So we've done over 850 interviews in 3 years. And, if we produced like every single thing, we just didn't have the man hours to actually, like doing an interview and turn it into a full production. It takes time.
Yeah.
So when you're doing like this, podcast that you're doing, and you're focusing on some things, I just wanted to like circle back to a couple of things. There's 3 things that cause subluxation, and that's thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And then there's stressors on the body. They're chemical, emotional, and physical. And what is really cool about what you're saying is you have been the locum, you have been the solopreneur, you've been the practitioner, you've been the student, and you've done things the right way. And now you found your lane. And you really want to work on the above atlas subluxation. You want to work with people's energetic energy and help them realign their life, not only their spine and their nervous system, their immune systems, but you want to realign people's lives, which I think is really, really, really cool when it comes to being a practitioner. And that's just it. Is chiropractic is such a wide variety of healers that it takes a while for you to designate what you want to do with your diploma and how you want to practice. And I think that it's just it's really cool to hear some of these things. And you are so spot on. The culture has lost their path to know what's good for them. And they're so confused for sleeping, hydration, relationships, values. And I think it's really important to have somebody like you that says, hey, come in, let us do some counsel with you and figure out what's best for you in your life. And it's almost being a life doctor. And, and then, what people say is the number one doctor is the one inside of you. And if you translate the meaning of doctor, it means teacher. So the teacher is the one inside of us, and that's the one that you unlock for people. So really cool stuff.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that feedback because, it's been a journey and it wasn't always easy, and it felt like I was, making some big leaps, and you don't know if that risk is always going to pay off. But to be able to hear you kind of really get what I'm doing and where I've come from and what I'm hoping to help the world with, while still being very honoring of chiropractic and the profession that I think of as my own, and also going forward into creating and serving in the best way, with my gifts and talents that will bring all of that together. It's really honoring and humbling to hear you be able to affirm that. So thank you.
Well, I think a lot of times there's a lot of disposition and judgment within the chiropractor upon chiropractor. If they're not in there seeing high volume and adjusting spines 5 days a week with split shifts and having, these massive teams that are hiring associates and opening up multiple clinics, but that's somebody else's dream. And I think that that's the greatest part about being a chiropractor is you guys all had a big dream is to help more people. And sometimes your dream doesn't align with the vision and the vision of another healer. And sometimes that can be a judgmental feeling that you have from colleagues that see what you're doing different than them. And they're like, well, Adeela is not doing it like me. She's not a chiropractor. And I think that we had to be sensitive to the chiropractic profession from practitioner to practitioner, knowing that there's a spot for each person on the team. And you're going to be a great referral source to that person that wants to see 500 PV a week And then you're going to be their best friend that wants to deal with some of these NET style situations with patients and work them through a longer visit with some more above Atlas work and helping them understand that it's not all about um, the manual adjustment that you do to people. It's sometimes about the metaphysical adjustment that you do to people.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what's ended up happening now that I'm settled back in New Zealand. I have a couple of really amazing practices that's exactly the setup we have is, there's always someone needing a chiropractor. I still get a weekly call or a message about, hey, can you see me for a chiropractic adjustment? And to be able to say, hey, actually, like my schedule is full. I don't do that anymore, but go see the chiropractors that I see and that I work with. And I'm always referring to a couple, especially the ones that I have this agreement with and understanding because they also understand what I'm doing, and they're referring me NET clients. Because the other thing I've learned working with a lot of chiros is a lot of them do not want to do what I'm doing. Neuro-emotional technique is not everyone's cup of tea, and vice versa, the high volume manual adjustment is not everyone's cup of tea. So there's definitely room for everyone, as you say, and there's definitely so much value in what everyone is doing and how they're doing it, because there's clients for everyone.
So where do you see the chiropractic profession heading in the next 20 years or so?
I think we're going through some really exciting changes. So I am loving seeing. So I graduated in 2010. So this is my 11th year out. So seeing the chiros coming through just from like a year or two below me, and I see a lot of them. I talk to them. I'm looking at what they're doing in their practices. There is the shift that is happening that has to happen, because how I got taught to practice chiropractic, market chiropractic, and build my business is actually hardly relevant anymore. Like, of course, the principles are the same. Of course, what we're doing in there one-on-one with the people are the same. But in terms of our strategies and our mindset around marketing and advertising and client attraction and retention and how to grow these businesses, it's been so awesome to see these younger grads come out and actually innovate with the time and utilize social media in the best way that they can, automate things, create things in a way that literally didn't exist, and that probably up until my year, there's been just too much hesitation to jumping into the new way of doing things. But if we don't move in that direction, we're going to become obsolete again, or we're going to become irrelevant if we can't be in the places that the people are, speaking in the way that the people can understand and respond to, and feel like they have a connection and that we're relevant to their lives in today's world.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with the question Luke asks and the response that you have. There's a huge shift for people not realizing that this is where the port of entry for health is, and that the game has changed in the past decade. I think that a lot of things have changed the way people position, the way they market, and what they perceive as success. And I think that people are now more aware than ever that they need to be more conscious about their decisions that they make to be preventative with their health. And the best person out there to give people this type of information that's well connected in that community is a doctor of chiropractic. And I think position is everything. We just have to really be more supportive of the profession as professionals for the people. And I think we have to understand that the educated mind sometimes becomes the egocentric mind. So if we can just learn to support chiropractic for the sake of chiropractic, then the things that you learned a decade ago transition with the way that the direction is going to go in the next 20 years.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, we study this stuff day in and day out. I mean, if you checked underneath my fingernails, it would say chiropractic on there somewhere. but let's transition back to you a little bit more. Who are your heroes? Who have you like looked up to as you've matriculated to become Dr. Adeela today? And if you could pick one person historically, could be somebody that you've enjoyed reading, somebody you've studied underneath, could be your family, somebody. Who would be the one person that you'd choose to have a cup of coffee with?
Right off the bat, off the top of my head, I'm just going to say Dr. Joe Dispenza, because I think he is fantastic, and I am hugely inspired by his journey and what he's creating. But just the material he's putting out there is brilliant, and is personally such a contribution to me, my life, how I understand my body, and what's happening and how to utilize everything better and to create with that quantum field. Like I said, going to attending the New Zealand College of Chiropractic, one of the things I'm grateful for and I speak about often is the quality and the number of guest speakers, lecturers, people that would come and speak to us. We had I had Bruce Lipton as a lecturer. We had all these guys like John DiMartini, Dr. Dane here coming in who are chiros or have a chiropractic background, and yet have kind of stretched that further into how do we take how we can help people, serve people, and what we are learning and applying it to human behavior, or how to create change in people in all areas of their life. So that was hugely informative for me and hugely inspiring. And for me, because of my natural interest, as I mentioned, in like the emotional and the mind-body connection and how to create connection and change at that emotional level, this is what I have kind of naturally aligned to, and really looked to these guys to also not limit myself to, having to be in practice, and that is the only way that I can serve or create change. Dr. Joe Dispenza, past and current right now, I'm still a huge advocate and fan of his work, and refer a lot of my clients to his books and meditations about how you can create change.
Really, really cool stuff. We actually interviewed Dr. Joe for our first film.
Oh, I'm going to go watch that. I missed that one.
Chiropractic, the documentary. Luke and I produced the film 5 years ago, and it was just amazing. We landed in this chiropractic seminar that Joe was speaking at, and DiMartini's in the movie as well. So we got a chance to talk to some of these innovators, to interview them for a film on chiropractic. And we just recently interviewed Bruce Lipton. And I guess my question to you, do you think they went to the New Zealand Chiropractic College because they wanted to talk about chiropractic and influence students, or do you think they just went to New Zealand because it's a cool place to go visit?
I'm sure it's the latter, and how they could justify it was, well, there's a college there and we'll stop by. No, but Bruce actually lives in New Zealand for a lot, like I think half the year or something. He loves it down here. So yeah, it was definitely lifestyle motivated, and the college was a handy justification.
So what would be one piece of advice that you would give to maybe a struggling chiropractic student right now?
If they're a student, I would say two things. Do what you need to get through, and believe in the process. It might feel difficult. It might feel like you're jumping through hoops, but do what you need to get through, because when you do get to the other side, being a chiropractor is one of the greatest things. Graduating and then being able to do whatever you want in whatever way you want is one of the greatest things. And if they're a struggling chiropractor who's already graduated but maybe a new grad, you're allowed to find the way to be in practice and to create your style of practice in the way that works for you. And you might not have been told that. And if you're an associate, that might also seem like you have limited choices. But even within an associateship, you don't have to stifle your personality or who you are or what would naturally work for you. And there are so many styles of practice, and there are so many modality, like techniques under chiropractic. Find the one that resonates with you. Find the way of being in practice that works for you. As Jim said, it might not be the high volume, turnover, split shift, 6 days a week practice that we grew up with. And if you are an associate with someone who's been in practice for like 20, 30 years, that might be the style that you think you have to subscribe to. I think that that's definitely changing. And I just want new grads to know that it's really cool and it's really fun, but they're allowed to play with it until they find what does work for them.
Yeah, I think it's some really sound advice for not only the student, but the early practitioner. And so many people just need some guidance. Maybe if I could follow up on that, I'd say find somebody that's really successful and ask them for coffee and go and sit down with them and take some mentorship as well. And I
Yes.
think that would be, I've never been to chiropractic school, so I can only imagine that it's a challenge, as you mentioned earlier. And it's worth the challenge because then you get to go do it your way. But let me ask you, so say you wanted to come practice in the United States in Grand Junction. I'm like, hey, Dr. Adeela, I have a clinic that needs you. Could you come practice here with your degree from New Zealand?
Not without doing recertification exams, like doing the board exams for your state, which are normally at least a 2-part process. I think there's a written component to board exams, and then there's a practical component. So apart from Australia and New Zealand and probably a few other countries that we have like a government agreement with, where our qualification is transferable. So that's why I could and have worked across both of those countries. And I think possibly a few countries in the Pacific, like the Pacific Islands, we could practice in. But for any other country, I'm pretty sure you need to sit the certification and be registered with the board of your country or state.
So I guess just let us know when you're ready. I'm kidding.
I actually love the States and I wouldn't mind, but with the state of the world, New Zealand seems to be the best place to be right now.
So we're coming on the back side of the interview. I know we have like 1 or 2 more questions for you. But is there anything that we maybe didn't touch on that you would like to share with our audience before we close out with you today?
Something that I love, and really, Jim, I think you'd appreciate this with what I'm seeing and hearing you do for the profession and with the marketing side of things, is, there's just a huge gap, which is not exclusive to chiropractic. It's just the way of the beast. Is you spend at least 5 years studying to become this chiropractor, this doctor of chiropractic, who's, you're just so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to go out there and serve and create what you hope will be a thriving practice. And then the gap that exists out, when you go out to create a business in the real world, and the struggle that can be. I've personally experienced it. I see so many people experiencing it. And as a whole in the profession, I see this real gap in people being able to create thriving, financially successful businesses, because where do you have the time, or how do you learn to create a business that works from a business model when you've put so many hours and you need to be working in the business or the practice? And so that's a particular passion of mine as well. I think there's 2 aspects to that conversation. One is the mindset around all sorts of things, like how to market yourself, putting yourself out there, owning and claiming who you are and what you do as a chiropractor, and then being able to make your services be, market it in a way so that it is what people are looking for. I think there's a large component of that comes down to mindset, and then there's a large component of that comes down to strategy. And I think especially when you first graduate, you don't necessarily have either of those components. And that can make those first few years, I would say the first 2 to 5 years of being in practice can be really difficult. And then once you're in and you start getting established, then it can start turning around. But I've seen and I've noticed a lot of people that, you know, are really struggling in those first 5 years, and some of them don't make it. Some of them, you know, need to be able to provide for a family or be able to pay for living expenses. And so I think this is an area that we need to have better support and better education in, that's relevant to people running businesses in whatever state or country they are in. And that's actually something that I'm doing now. I do that with a lot of practitioners, healers, and coaches from all industries. But I've had a lot of chiropractors, and it's been really humbling because I've had chiropractors who are my own friends and my own classmates go through that process with me, because I want to see us thriving, and we can't serve when we're struggling ourselves financially.
Absolutely.
So when you're not at practice and you're not running a podcast, what kind of things do you do to unwind? What are some of your hobbies that you do for fun?
Well, I'm a shopaholic, but I hardly get to shop now because all the shops are closed or in lockdown. I'm a coffee addict, so I'm drinking a lot of coffee. And one of the side effects of COVID for us is I used to travel a lot, and I don't anymore. I've been here for coming up to a year without leaving the country. So we got a puppy during the last lockdown. So she takes up all of my spare time. And I'm actually just really grateful that she's having a lovely long nap right now so that there's no interference for our recording time.
That's cool. And what do you like to listen to? What do you like to read?
Oh, I love self-help, self-development. I feel like I'm always learning or doing a course and stuff like that. So if I have time and I'm not doing like self-development or self-help, then I love any sort of crime or, you know, fiction, like thriller type stuff that'll take me completely away from business and reality. Like I love the Jack Reacher books. I love John Grisham, that kind of stuff. But in terms of personal development, and like there's just so much amazing content. Like I said, you know, Joe Dispenza's books are always on my Audible. Stuff like also Profit First for business owners. Even as a practice owner, I found that a really great system for how to organize finances for my business. So yeah, I can flick you guys through my recommended reading list. I've actually got one.
Well, thank you so much for opening up your mind and your heart and sharing with your voice and your personality today. It's been really an honor to be able to have you on our show today and to just spotlight you and hear about how you got to where you are today and why you do what you do. And I think that when you share this with your friends and colleagues and family, they're going to understand a little bit more about who you are. And that's the essence of our show. Our process is to keep free speech alive in the chiropractic profession and to keep telling the story. And whether that's from New Zealand or from Colorado, we believe that the story is the most valuable part of the profession moving forward. And that's why we keep documenting it with these podcast interviews. And you're one of those now. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you, Jim and Luke. It's been not only a privilege and a pleasure, but yeah, that connection between New Zealand and America, and also just on behalf of chiros in New Zealand, thank you for doing what you're doing. I actually, have been following you recently and seeing what you're doing and how dedicated you are to the profession. And I appreciate you for that and applaud your efforts.
Well, it's a day-to-day deal, you know. The bad guys don't take a day off, so why should we?
So good.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. I know we had a lot of fun. And anyone at home, if you want to run a podcast just like ours, go to chirohustlemasterclass.com. Dr. Adeela Thank you. I tripped on my tongue. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again for being our guest.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Talk to you soon.